This is a guitar I made. It took 2 months and who knows how much it cost. But the real question is, does it work? Well, before we can find out, I need to make it, so let's go back a few months. The first thing I had to do was make the body. Since I already own a guitar, I figured I'll just trace the guitar shape onto some plywood. I then cut out the rough shape. I tried to stay a little bit away from where I traced, just so then I could go back later and get the fine details. Also, I noticed that the wood kept chipping a little bit, and I didn't want it to chip onto the piece I was going to use. Once they were cut out, I also sanded them down with the grinder. I don't know how this works, but apparently when I'm using the jigsaw, the wood can chip, but when I'm sanding, it doesn't chip. I don't know how that works. Anyway, the grinder worked great for getting the shape. Now unfortunately a little bit did get chipped, but that's okay. You won't be able to see it because I'll just make this the inside of the guitar. Speaking of the inside of the guitar, we're going to work on that in a minute, but just before we do that, we need to cut out the circle. And this was actually quite hard. I started by drilling a hole and then using my jigsaw to cut out as much as I could. But just like before, it started to chip a little bit, so I had to be careful. I also realized I wasn't getting a perfect circle using the jigsaw. So I drew another circle slightly bigger and decided to cut the rest out using another method, which was sanding it by hand, and it took forever. Okay, now that special thing we have to do to the inside is called acoustics. This is pretty much what allows the guitar to be really loud and make all the noises we know. Without it, a guitar would be quite underwhelming, so it's very important that we get this part right. To do this, we're going to cut up a bunch of wood. Simply cutting it up isn't enough, so we're also going to sand it to a shape. We're tapering it at each end, but we're also tapering each of the long sides as well. It's pretty much just going to be a really long pyramid. That's the best way of describing it. Real ones are a little bit different, but mine should still work, at least in theory. I guess we'll find out later. With them all cut out and prepared, it was time to just glue them to the guitar. And it's very important that we also line these up correctly, otherwise we won't be able to put every piece together later on. Now that's the front and back done. It's time to work on the hardest part, and that's going to be the sides. To make the sides of the guitar, I need to bend the wood. This is easier said than done. This is the part that took the longest, and many attempts. To do this, I need to kerf the wood. Kerfing is where you cut a bunch of slits into the wood, but it doesn't go all the way through. It goes about 80 or 90% of the way through the wood. By doing this over and over again, the wood becomes bendy. The one downside is it takes a really long time to do this. And just look how much it bends. By the way, that was not the first one I snapped. In fact, I snapped 2 others. The reason it keeps breaking is because the wood is dry. Normally you would steam wood, but I don't have the facilities to do that, so instead I'm going to cold soak. Cold soaking is where you fill up a tub of water, place the wood inside, leave it for a few hours. It makes the wood stronger and gives the wood a better chance of being manipulated. But if you leave the wood in the water for too long, it starts to grow mold. So I quickly kerfed 2 more planks of wood and got out a tub, filled it up with water, and then I went and got a tub that was big enough for the planks. To keep the wood completely submerged, I also placed bricks on top of it and left it for 2 hours. Having wet wood is good and all, but I need something to put it around while it dries. From using old cutoffs and spare wood from old builds, I can make a frame. By gluing the wood together in this arrangement and letting it dry, it looks like this. I know it doesn't look like much, but it's going to be something in a minute, just wait. But with the magic of sanding, I can transform this into the shape of half a guitar. With the shape I made and the wet wood ready to use, I could start wrapping it around the mold I made. To hold it in place, I'm going to use both clamps and bricks. I had it the shape I wanted, and it hadn't snapped yet, so that was a good sign. I just needed to let it dry, and that would take 48 hours. But while it dries, let me tell you about today's sponsor, PCBWay. PCBWay is your one-stop shop for anything 3D printing, but they also do a lot more than just that. They offer a range of other services, such as mold injection, CNC machining, and laser sheet metal cutting. All you have to do is drag and drop your file, select the quantity and the material you want it made out of. Now you may be wondering, what do I need 3D printed? Well, I'm making the guitar, I need somewhere to keep my picks. This is a custom 3D printed metal pick holder. All you need to do is grab your picks and put them inside for safekeeping. Once again, thank you to PCBWay for the sponsor. Go check them out. 2 days later, the wood was not only dry, but it was stuck in this shape. I took it off the mold and almost dropped it, but it was looking good. Apart from one thing, it did have marks on it from the clamps. Hopefully I'll be able to remove these later, but that's only half done. I need to do this to the other half now. So I filled up the tub of water again and left it to soak, before I then clamped it in place. While that dries, let's move on to the neck of the guitar. This right here. I cut it to the correct length I wanted, and now it's time to sand it down to the proper shape. which by the way took eternity. Like, I kid you not, I brought the thickest bit of wood and it just took way too long. However, I'm really happy I used pine because that made things way easier. Also, it completely covered my backyard in sawdust. My mum was not happy. But hey, look, the shape of the neck was done and we can move on to the next part. So the neck of a guitar is more than just a slab of wood. It has a truss rod. A truss rod is a bit of metal that sits in the neck that can be adjusted to move it up or down. And since I'm making it from scratch, I don't have a truss rod. I could have bought one, but I thought I had a better idea. I would just use this metal rod. After all, it will do the same thing. It will stop it from bending. Now, to add the truss rod in, I need to cut out a trench that the rod can then sit in. So I marked it off, got my router out and cut it out. With that done, I just need to cut down the metal to the correct size and add it with way too much glue. The reason I have all the glue is because I don't want it moving anywhere. I also needed to add a lid by using the offcut wood from the body of the guitar. I also glued that down and left it to dry. When that was dried, I just needed to sand it down, add the machine head holes, and add a little bit more wood at the base to make it taller. Since that was the easiest, I'm going to start with that. I just had to cut a rectangle. Okay, this is a machine head, and I didn't make it. I also didn't make the fretboard, and I also didn't make this, the bridge, because that is way out of my pay grade. I have no idea how to do it, so I just bought them. And they're the only components I bought. For the machine heads, I drilled 6 holes into the head. And I also gave it another sand down as it was a little bit too thick. While I was sanding it down, I also smoothed out the sides where the lid connects to the neck, so then you won't be able to feel the difference when you hold it. With the neck shape done, I had to focus on attaching the machine heads. Also, 5 of the 6 holes lined up, but one of them was slightly out, so I really hope you don't have OCD. Putting the machine heads in was very easy. They just go in and they screw together like bolts. And just like a bolt, you can use a spanner to tighten them. And you want these pretty tight as you don't want them rotating around. Although that one hole was quite out of place, now since the machine heads are in, you can't really tell. Although they look like they're in place, there's one last thing to do, and that's we have to put the screws in the back. It doesn't feel like that screw does anything, but I added it anyway. Instead of preventing it from falling out, I think it more just stops the machine head from rotating. So I guess it is important. So next is the hardest and scariest part. I need to put everything together. And I was terrified. I had spent 2 months making this thing, and it was finally time to put it together. I was going to do this piece by piece. I glued down one piece, leave it to dry for a day, and then glue down the next one. And I used a lot of glue. When clamping the pieces in place, I had to be very careful, as if I was to clamp too tight, it could slide the piece of wood. And it's very important that all of these pieces line up perfectly, because otherwise the whole guitar just won't sit right. Also, once I had one wall in and I was leaving it to dry, I glued on the bridge to the face of the guitar. It is incredibly important that I get this in the right spot. The main distance I need to worry about is getting the length from the top of the neck of the guitar all the way to the top of the bridge. And after it dried, this is what it looks like. One corner had shifted slightly, and that's not going to cause any problems in the future at all. Moving on. Now since the bridge is in place, I need to drill into the front of the guitar, making the holes for the pegs to sit. The pegs are what hold the guitar strings in place. The only thing I need to be careful of here is I don't want the holes to be too wide, otherwise the pegs won't stay in place. It had been over 24 hours, so it was time to deal with the body again. Before I can glue the other half down, I first need to clean up all of the glue that had spilled out where the other piece is going to connect. By using a knife, I easily cut that away. Now, I didn't want to put glue on straight away and stick the other half on, as I wasn't entirely sure if the other half was the right size. And good thing I checked, because it was a little bit too big. So I cut off 2 of the curved lines and made it smaller. And that's exactly what it needed to be, because now it fits perfectly. So I went and got out the glue, put my copious amounts of it onto the body, and stuck that second half on. And I left it to dry for another day. It was time to glue the neck of the guitar on. It was a little hard to get the neck in because the sides had curved in a tiny bit. But after wiggling it around, I eventually got it in place and used the clamps to hold it down. Once again, leaving it for another day. It was finally time to put the face of the guitar on, and I barely had enough clamps to hold it down. Now, normally I'd leave it for a day and then go back to gluing, but I was really impatient at this point, so I left it for about 2 hours and then decided I'd glue down the final piece. Also, me tapping on the front shows that the acoustics are working. Okay, technically there are 2 pieces to glue down. We have the fretboard and the nut of the guitar. I cleaned off all of the stray glue, and then I applied the glue to the fretboard. before setting it in place. I also put the nut on at the very end. And it was looking amazing. But since I really wanted to make sure all of the glue was set for this next part, I let it dry for 2 days. Now it might look like the guitar is done, but it's not quite there. I still need to sand down 2 things, both being the extra lip that sticks off the ends and the marks left from the clamps. Starting with the grinder, I sanded away the lip. By using a sanding disc, I didn't have to worry about any chipping. It sanded it away with no issues, and now we can move on to the other part. I didn't want to use the grinder for this part because I was afraid I'd go too deep and go straight through. So instead I hand sanded it, and unfortunately I couldn't get rid of the marks. Before we can string it, I just wanted to oil it. This will protect the wood and it will also make it a little darker. Protecting the wood is really important as I don't want anything bad happening to this guitar. This is one of my biggest projects. And it was also really satisfying watching the change of the color and watching the wood absorb the oil. I wouldn't be oiling the inside, obviously, or the fretboard. And with that, the build was done. Alright, so what's going on here? There was a little bit of a problem. Let's just say something didn't quite line up. Hey look, it's not perfect, but as long as it works, that's all that matters. Speaking of which, let's hear how she sounds. So the guitar sounds good, apart from the first 3 frets. You see, the fretboard needs to be pushed up just a little bit. The strings are too close. By doing that, the first 3 frets will sound better, but that's a fix for another day. For now, I'm going to be using this, a capo. By placing it on the 4th fret, it works just fine. Also, here's those acoustics again. Now, I'm not the world's best guitar player, but it does sound like a real guitar. Just a little quieter. Overall, I'm really happy with the build. I'm a little disappointed that it doesn't 100% work, but I'm definitely going to come back and fix it. To fix it, by the way, I just need to raise the nut higher. This will bring the strings up. There might be other ways to fix it, and if you guys have any ideas, let me know. What do you guys think? Is this a good build or a fail? It was fun, it was challenging, and what should I build next? Let me know, and thanks for watching.